Welcome, everybody, to the League of Women Voters of Lynchburg City Council Candidates Forum. The League is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. My name is Judy Lee. I am the League president. We are so pleased to see you here tonight and are delighted that all 7 candidates are present. You have probably been reading Margaret Carmel's articles in the newspaper reflecting the views of the candidates on a variety of issues. Tonight is the opportunity to get to know the candidates in person and to submit your own questions to them. Our thanks go to Valeria Chambers, Clerk of City Council, for arranging for us to be here tonight, and to Phil Spinner and Steve Smallshar from Lynchburg TV. They will be operating the sound system and directing the broadcast. We also thank the members of the Mayor's Youth Council who will serve as runners this evening. Now, Dr. Joanna Harris, our moderator, will go over the forum details.
Good evening. I also want to welcome you to the 2018 Lynchburg City Council Candidates Forum. I'm Joanna Harris, member of the Voter Service League Committee in the League, and I will be the moderator tonight. I'm going to just take a second for what I want to do here tonight before we get started and add to what Judy said. I think a lot of people don't know what the League of Voters is and what it's all about. And I'd just like to take a minute to tell you from whence we came. We are a descendant of the National Women's Suffragette Association. And that suffragette association worked for 72 years of hard struggle to get the right for women to vote. The 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution was passed in 1920 after all the hard work of the suffragettes, our foremothers. And at that point, the League of Women Voters was founded, replacing the Suffragette Association. From the beginning, the League has believed that citizens should play a critical role in government. We are strictly nonpartisan, as Judy said. We neither support nor oppose candidates nor parties. We work to increase understanding of public policy issues. We encourage citizens to become informed and to vote. We register voters and provide election information through voter guides as well as holding candidates forums, and that's why we're here tonight. Be sure you get one of these if you haven't already. There's a wealth of information. This was prepared by our local league, and I think you can learn a lot from it. And also, if you need more information on the candidates and like to work on the web rather than written paper, go to vote411.org on the net, and it will tell you more about your candidates tonight. So enough of the history lesson. The format will be as follows. The candidates will have the opportunity to introduce themselves and to make a 1-minute opening statement. After this, it will be followed by 2 questions formulated by the League, and that will be asked of all candidates, and their response will be limited to 1 minute. Then questions from the audience will be asked. These must be submitted in writing. There are cards and pencils available to everyone, and if you write your question, hold it up. Someone will pick it up and bring it up here. Questions may be addressed to a particular candidate or to the entire board of candidates there. To save time and to allow time for lots of questions, we ask that you try to zero in on 1 or 2 candidates with your questions. Again, their response will be limited to 1 minute. Time permitting, we'll let each candidate ask another candidate a question, which is always interesting. And that will be 1 minute for a response. And then each candidate will be given 2 minutes for a closing statement. To remind the candidates, the timers are right here in front of you. A yellow card means you have 15 seconds left. A red card means your time is up. Please stop. All right, I've got my grandmother's gavel right here, so I'll let you know. Please hold your applause till the end of the forum. Please turn off your cell phones, recorders, cameras, anything of that sort. And the forum is being broadcast live on LTV tonight and will be available for viewing later on the city's website. All right, to get started, I think we'll go down the line for the introduction. Mr. Billingsley, would you like to start? Tell us a little about yourself and why you're running.
Good evening. My name is Albert Billingsley. I am a member of CASA. I'm on board with CASA. I'm involved with Safe Families for Children. I went through the Citizens Academy in 2015. I'm currently the president of Windsor Hills Neighborhood Association. And I'm a married man to my wife, Lisa, out in the audience. We have 2 children, Amy and Wesley. Amy went through high school at Heritage, as so did Wesley, but Amy is a gifted child, and our son Wesley is autistic, so we've seen both ends of the educational spectrum. I was on the Lynchburg City School Board for 9 years. All 9 years I was on the Governor's School Board, and I was also involved in several task forces, including the Heritage High School Task Force. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Seifert.
Hi, I'm Katie Webb Seifert. I'd like to thank the League for holding this event tonight. I've come to them for many years and appreciate the service you all provide. I am a lifelong resident of Lynchburg. This is my hometown, both of childhood and the one that my husband and I have chosen to keep as adults. I've been engaged in this community in a variety of ways over the years. I'm currently an 8th grade science teacher at Lincoln Middle School, but I also have experience as a special education teacher as well as financial services consultant. I am running because I am concerned for our city. I love this city, but I do believe that we can do a better job on a variety of fronts, and that if we're going to commit ourselves to improving our infrastructure, having excellent education, and continuing the work of Poverty to Progress and some of our other initiatives, that we need to get out there, understand the needs, and formulate good solutions based on that. I hope I can bring my experience to the table on council. Thank you so much.
Mr. Johnson.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Caesar Johnson. I previously served 12 years on Lynchburg City Council. 6 of those years I served as the vice mayor of the city. I'd like to come ask for your vote on May 1st to be reelected to council. There's 3 things that are very important to me: public service, public education, and economic development. And I'd like to come back to council and make sure that those things are taken care of and I push the needle forward. I am married, have a wife that's an educator in the Campbell County school system. I have 4 children, 2 sons who graduated from Heritage High School, and I have 2 younger children who are students at Bass Elementary School, the year-round school program. I'm very much vested into this city. I'm very much invested in the outcomes that come out of this city, and I'd like to be a part of the change that goes forward. And I'm asking people to help me move this city forward with a One Lynchburg campaign, because our potholes in our city don't have Democratic or Republican potholes, but all of the potholes need fixing, and they need fixing by our council. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, and I also want to thank the League for this forum. It's always a high-quality event and well-attended. I am Randy Nelson. I am virtually a lifelong resident of Lynchburg, a product of the Lynchburg Public Schools. My parents were educators. My wife currently is a principal in a Lynchburg elementary school. I went to law school, and during my law school years, I was a police officer and gained a lot of experience about municipal laws and procedures during that. I am an attorney at law and have practiced in Lynchburg for 42 years, representing businesses and persons from all backgrounds and neighborhoods and interests in this city. I also sat for 28 years in the 24th Judicial Circuit as a special justice, holding hearings with regard to those in need. I've been on council since 2010, was elected in 2010, re-elected in 2014, have served on the Finance Committee for 8 years, was past chairman of the Finance Committee, and I want to continue serving my city using my experience and my good relations with City Council and the citizens to promote independent, nonpartisan, common sense decisions for all citizens. Thank you.
Mr. Polly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Derek Polly. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, but I came here back in 2002 to go to Liberty University. That's where I met my wife, Nina. Well, at that time, Nina Smith. She's a lifelong resident here. Her mother's lived on Timbridge Hill. Her father's from Daniels Hill. I started the professional basketball team, the Lynchburg Legends. As I said, I also sit on the Lynchburg City School Board, where I serve as a finance chair, overseeing about $100 million. I'm also on the discipline committee. Very dedicated to Lynchburg, very different from the place where I grew up, so I appreciate it because it gave me an opportunity to start a new life and find some opportunities. So that's why I'm so passionate about serving the community. I have 3 beautiful children who attend Lynchburg City Schools, 2 at T.C. Miller and 1 at Dunbar Middle School. I plan on being a strong advocate for education and making sure that Lynchburg City keeps funding the things that we need to keep it a wonderful place. Thank you.
Ms. Tweedy.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for League of Women Voters, and thank all of our citizens for coming out this evening. I am Trenae L. Tweedy, and I currently serve as an at-large member of Lynchburg City Council and as the city's vice mayor. I was born and reared in Rivermont, graduated from E.C. Glass High School, then went to serve as a U.S. Navy journalist aboard a ship, came back home, went to Lynchburg College where I graduated. I reared 3 children who graduated from Heritage High School, and I'm a grandmother to an adorable little grandson. So I like to be very involved. So I served 6 years on the school board, where 2 of those years I served as vice chair. I'm very appreciative to have been serving on council for 4 years, where I've served on Horizon Behavioral Health Board, Youth Services Board. I serve on the Housing Authority. Also, I have served on the Physical Development and the Finance Committee. I believe in being an action-oriented council member to address challenges and celebrate the successes of our city. So I'm asking for your vote on May 1st.
Mr. Wright.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bo Wright, and I just want to thank also the League for hosting us here this evening. I'm a native of Lynchburg. I went to the Lynchburg Public Schools, graduated from Glass. My 3 siblings also went through the city schools. After I left Lynchburg, I went off to William & Mary for college, and then I went to Washington, where I served in the White House for 5.5 years in a number of roles in the Office of the White House Counsel, and then the last 2 years as the White House Finance Director. And in that role, I managed a $55 million appropriation from Congress every year. I had to balance a budget every year. And so that's the experience that I want to bring home to Lynchburg, to the community that I love. And so I live downtown now. I'm thrilled to live downtown. I'm excited to see Lynchburg's economy grow. I want to invest in our public schools, and I really think that we need to be doing a lot more on poverty. So that's what I'm excited to talk about this evening. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you. Now, the questions formulated by the League. You all get the same question, which is, what one issue would you prioritize to improve the quality of life in Lynchburg? And I thought, how am I going to make this fair? I'm going to draw your names out of the bowl here. Mr. Wright, you are the first to respond.
I love it. To me, I think the success of our community long-term hinges on our addressing poverty. 24.6% poverty is simply unacceptable, I think, in our community. And so I think that the city has a really important role to play here as a resource, as a convener, bringing people together, as a motivator. And I think that city council and the city should be investing resources and providing that institutional support that I think that we really need to have in order to really spur a community-wide effort to address poverty. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take nonprofits, faith communities, the city. We're going to have to knock down silos, make sure that we're sharing information, make sure that folks are aware of the resources that already exist. But I think that City Council really needs to be driving that train, and on Council I'll be a strong advocate for fighting poverty here in the city.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. Quality of life actually is, to a degree, a subjective question or issue. I think the question should be what priority would have the greatest effect on most people and interest in Lynchburg. And to that, I would say that it would be to remove the generational cycle of poverty. No doubt a person who is in poverty is not able to support themselves to an adequate level, nor their families. It is very difficult for them to earn an income that's able to generate the economy to a level that is beneficial to the general community and their neighborhood, and that reflects on the types of businesses that we have here. If we can deal with a 24% poverty rate and uplift that by reducing it, then we all benefit from it, not only in having a greater and more able workforce for the employers, which attracts businesses to come here when it's a responsible workforce, but the entire approach to the cost of city government would go down.
Mr. Billingsley.
The one thing I think I would try to concentrate on would be to draw more industry back to Lynchburg that has a higher pay scale. And by doing that, we could also reduce the tax burden on the citizens. And with this, we could also reduce the poverty rate. To me, that would be the number one thing I would work on is trying to attract businesses with better paying jobs, higher paying jobs. To do that, though, we'd also have to have more emphasis on some technical trades that we currently don't have in the schools, and it would be such as welding and things of that nature, because those type of jobs are very high paying. It doesn't take a college education. College isn't for everybody, but it is something that could be very beneficial to this economy.
Ms. Seifert.
I believe one of the greatest advantages to this community is the people, without a doubt. And I have been engaged in a variety of organizations, gone out there, met a lot of people who have a lot of different viewpoints. We do, however, have a disconnect between the city and many of the residents of the city. Sometimes people don't realize that resources are available to them. One thing I'd like to see is additional engagement, and that includes on our boards and commissions. That has been a goal of the city for 20 plus years, trying to get more people from a variety of viewpoints engaged on our boards and commissions so that we can understand the issues and formulate good solutions. In order to do that, I think we need to move away from some of our more important boards and commissions meeting at 8:30 a.m. on the weekday. That's not a time that many people can attend, either to serve as board members nor to just simply participate in the process. So I'd like to see those boards and commissions meetings move to the evenings to increase our engagement.
Mr. Johnson.
Thanks for asking that question. The one issue that I would prioritize to improve the quality of life in the city of Lynchburg is health care accessibility for all its citizens. This past weekend, we had a community cares event at the Salvation Army, and we saw groves of people come in who couldn't have basic health care needs met. And I would like to see more of those kind of programs moved along in different areas of the city. We're focusing on the downtown corridor now, but there are areas in our city that are like food deserts that have no access for the poor in those neighborhoods, and I'd like to see that moved.
Mr. Polly.
The one thing that I would focus on would be poverty, of course, as some of my colleagues have mentioned. As a financial planner, my job is to meet with people daily and to talk about their finances. So that's what I do. And the one thing I've noticed is that there's some basic fundamental principles of financial literacy that most of us aren't getting in high school or later on in life. So one thing I know about poverty is that it's a mindset. And until we actually are giving people skills and tools to help pull themselves away from poverty and to change the way they look at money, we're going to keep this perpetual cycle of generational poverty. I believe that if we start giving some of the strategies, do you have a savings? Do you have emergency savings? Do you have a checking account? Are you aware of some of the opportunities that are available for investing when you get to that level? I believe some of these things will help people understand the value of money and what it means. Coming from somebody who's lived under the poverty line, I know how my mindset changed once I was given financial literacy, so I understand what it takes to help close that gap.
Thank you. Ms. Tweedy.
The one issue that I will continue to prioritize, as I have with council and the mayor, is the poverty issue. The reduction of poverty in the city of Lynchburg will benefit more residents, so everyone can enjoy the quality of life. The long-term reduction of the high poverty rate and the increase of the household median income will provide more future opportunities. And what people don't really realize is that the issues of poverty affect many areas in our city. The connection of poverty to workforce development, to education, to neighborhood revitalization, and business and employer needs must be addressed. As a growing city, we cannot allow this rate to increase. We must create better pathways and bridges using the resources that are already available in our city. Breaking down the silos are important, yet creating sustainable solutions that will be long-term solutions for our families and the individuals is crucial. And that's the priority I will continue to address because it affects many areas.
Thank you. Second question to all of you. As you review the budget, what ideas do you have for meeting city responsibilities with diminished revenue? Again, I'll pull out Mr. Johnson.
Great question. Thanks for asking me first.
It's all fate here.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Essential services must be maintained. Public safety, public education, and water resources must be cared for at a time of diminishing revenue. The core services that government provides for its citizens for the common good should be maintained at a high level. And non-essential services should be cut back or eliminated until revenues increase to sustain these services. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Polly.
I believe to offset some of the stale revenue that we've been receiving here in Lynchburg, we could focus on capturing some of the money that is leaving Lynchburg. I know every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we all see people on social media anyway. You see people leaving Lynchburg, going to Richmond, going to Charlottesville, going to different places, looking for entertainment, looking for different restaurants or whatever type of services they may be looking for. So I think that we have a lot of capital that's leaving Lynchburg. People work in Lynchburg all week long, and then they go right to Greensboro or Richmond or whatever to spend that money. I believe investing into some of those, some of that entertainment where people are leaving to spend their money elsewhere will be a way that we can capture some of those resources right here in Lynchburg to help increase the revenue.
Thank you. Ms. Tweedy.
I think one thing that we have to do is decide what standard of living do we want in Lynchburg, what continued operations and services do we want, because they are costly. And so we have flat revenues, and so we have to look at how do we develop our economic development strategies. We're living in a social economy, so there are many different factors that affect our revenue streams. So yes, we have to look at new opportunities utilizing the assets we have in our city, but we also have to address what types of services do we want to continue and how do we want to fund them. And no one likes to hear the dreaded tax increase. No one wants to address that. But then we have to find those new opportunities. We have to create more businesses that will not only grow in Lynchburg, but have the opportunity to hire folks, and they have more discretionary income. We have to look at our own departments to see, are we utilizing every dollar? We have to scrub through each line item, and are we getting all of the services we can utilizing technology in place of some of their more traditional services. Thank you.
Mr. Billingsley.
Well, I guess I would start with a two-prong approach. I would first want to look in-house in the Lynchburg city government and have a hard look at the way we're structured and try to see if we can't do it better, easier, stronger, more efficiently by possibly returning some of the things like the tourism department back to the private sector rather than having something like that in-house. And also, as I mentioned earlier, attracting businesses back to the city, not only just any business, but basically businesses, industries that have higher paying jobs, higher paying wages. That I think would help reduce the burden on the taxpayers.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. I respectfully dispute that revenues are diminished. They are simply not rising as fast as they have been over the last 4 years. That is a phenomenon that's not unique to Lynchburg. It's partly because of online shopping is depleting local collection of sales taxes. It's also because of the baby boomers are retiring, and those who bought houses and durable goods now are downsizing and not buying those houses anymore. Likewise, millennials are attracted to experiences and not home ownership and establishing families as much as it was with the baby boomers. So there's a new orientation within the market in this country. In 2010, when I first came on council, we were facing the most significant financial crisis in 75 years. The city addressed issues, and we established sound financial practices involving higher reserves, lower estimation of future cost and expenses, and since then we made it through that crisis and we are on sound footing. Lynchburg is one of the highest rated financial municipal areas in the country.
Thank you. Mr. Wright.
So I believe that Lynchburg is actually a well-run city, and we do it on a lean budget. But I also believe that we should be always reviewing our practices to make sure that we're delivering services as economically and as efficiently as possible. I also believe that we should be investing in ourselves. And I think that means investing more in our Office of Economic Development to retain and attract businesses that will increase our tax base. I think it's about thoughtful rezoning to encourage more development. It's about innovative public-private partnerships. And I also think we should have a frank and candid conversation as a community about our tax rates, given, as has been mentioned, diminished revenues.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Seifert.
Departments all across the city have been asked to make voluntary cuts for the last few years and have done so. We have done as much as we can to conserve the resources that are available. When the new Heritage High School was built, part of that budget was new science equipment. And so I spent time in the summer driving back and forth to the old Heritage, pulling microscopes and glassware to ensure that those were being passed down. We have departments all over the city that have cut back as far as they can. We have to apply for state and federal money whenever possible, and I feel as though the projects we put forth for state and federal money should reflect the areas of highest need across the city and reflect our values in terms of moving the needle for the hardworking people of Lynchburg. But I do recall a few years ago when we had that tax cut, when we had facing cutting people or doing a tax increase, that we did the math, and my husband and I realized that the tax increase proposal would cost us about $14 a month on our monthly mortgage bill. We decided that $14 a month was something we were willing to do in order to keep our local people employed and to keep our services in place, and I hope that we can have that if we absolutely have to have those discussions on the table.
Okay, thank you. Now it's time for questions from the audience. Here's one here. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. First question is to Mr. Billingsley. Will you closely align yourself with Council Member Helgeson, or will you be more moderate in your votes?
Well,
Welcome to the audience.
I am a conservative. I am a member of the Republican Party. I will vote my conscience. I will vote as far as my conservative values will send me. I am my own person. Mr. Helgeson and I do agree on a lot of things, but we don't always agree on everything. It's kind of like me and my wife. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't. We work things out. That's what I plan to do on council if you elect me. I will look at things through conservative eyes, try to be as fiscally responsible and sound as possible, and I will make my own decisions based on my own values and faith.
Okay. Mr. Polly, I was intrigued by your comments in the News and Advance concerning coming universities. Will you please elaborate on this idea?
Yes, I believe that was communiversities, is what I was talking about in the newspaper.
That's my
No,
reading
that's
problem.
fine. A communiversity, what that is when you take someone who's already in the community, a leader. For instance, let's go to 5th Street, right at Nubian City, Miss Blanding, Miss Thais Blanding, who happens to be a partner of mine in the community. She's an advocate. She's a cornerstone where people trust her, and she's already built that rapport. So it's taking someone who has position in the community and actually placing items for academic education or some type of education inside of her place of business. So we would have things about financial literacy located in Miss Blanding's shop. So now there are people that can use her shop as a resource for not only financial literacy, but she has where you can get voters information, you can get registered to vote and different other things of that nature. So you're taking concepts from the community and placing also an academic aspect to it. So you're actually bringing the resources to the community. That's the basic concept, instead of the community coming to the resource.
Okay. This is not designated, so I'll just throw it out there to all of you. How would you, once elected, push for a citywide campaign of awareness of and connection to social resources in existence? Mr. Wright, you want to start with that, and want me to read it again?
Yes, ma'am. I'd be delighted.
How would you, once elected, push for a citywide campaign of awareness of and connection to social resources in existence?
I'm assuming that the question has to do with social services that are available to handle questions. Okay. So I had a wonderful conversation the other week with a county administrator down in James City County in Williamsburg. And he was describing how a number of residents in his community were having a hard time accessing services, in large part because they simply weren't aware that they existed. And so he proposed a pretty novel solution, though a fairly simple one. You have a one-stop shop. You have all the services in one place several times a year, and folks can come in. That is widely publicized. You make sure the community is fully aware in the newspaper and on television, on social media, wherever. And you invite people to come in, and then you have all the services right there in one big hall. I can think that of 10 good places downtown where we could have that, or out in the community. So there are plenty of opportunities. There are small ways, small things that we can do as a community that I think would make accessing services that much easier.
Okay, Ms. Tweedy?
Thank you. For communication and awareness of many resources, we have a wealth of resources in the community. As far as council, we have a communications department that has numerous computer-based, web-app technology centers, technology opportunities. Also, how do we utilize our community centers that are located in each neighborhood, and reimagining the communication network and the information that's shared through our community centers. Also, creating the public-private kind of partnership networks I talk about. For all of the dollars that come into our community with many of the agencies and organizations, they are limited on marketing dollars. So we need to create some public opportunities of donations and donors for volunteers to help with a communication network. To market programs is costly, and so it has to be a collaborative effort between agencies, between private donors, between the public, in order to do that, because most programs don't get the needed marketing dollars for communication and awareness in our community.
Okay, Mr. Polly.
Repeat the question one more time,
Yes.
please.
How would you, once elected, push for a citywide campaign of awareness of and connection to social resources in existence?
Well, I think the city is doing a good job with the communication, with what they already have in place. I think it's going one thing I've noticed about the communication in Lynchburg is that you have to be in the know to get the information. So if you're in that particular circle, then you'll get that information. We have to start thinking about how do we get the information to the people who aren't in those circles or with the people of that influence. And I believe community captains, finding the leaders in the community and getting that information to someone who can be a distributor for the city of Lynchburg can get the information to places where it normally doesn't get. Sometimes we say, well, we're sending out emails and we're on Facebook and we're making phone calls and we're still not getting the results that we want from attendance. So if we take the information to the community and find someone in the community who can be our champion to reach out to people who already have the trust, who already have the rapport, I feel that way we can get a lot more communication to where people need to get to. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. As I said, I was a special justice, and that meant that I would hold hearings on persons who may be adjudicated to be in need of services. I also served in the J&D court for children and families who needed services. As soon as that child was adjudicated to be in need of services, or that individual was declared by me to be in need of services, all the judge or I had to do was issue an order, and all of the wealth of services in this community were focused on addressing the needs of that individual. That, unfortunately, was after the fact, after someone's life has spiraled down to the bottom and there was not much left. We need to do something proactive at the beginning with all of the resources that we have to be able to network them so that anytime anyone appears to be in need, a signal will go out within the network to draw the resources available. Einstein said, or at least he's attributed to say, when you do something the same way over and over and over again and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. We have had a post-addressing of the issue for 60 years. We need to be proactive, and it's got to be community-driven on a basis that's privately funding. It can't rely on government or city council where political shifts may cut off the revenue tap at some point in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Appreciate you asking me the question. Anybody in here got a trash can at their house? Everybody got a trash can? Anybody remember Bart the Cart's communication event that went out to tell people how to use that trash can and how to get a trash sticker? We already have the model in the city, and if I'm reelected to council and I had to push these social one-stop shopping, I will use the same techniques that we use to get people aware of the trash, new trash cans. Put the money in social and back into communications and get them to do a marketing campaign, very simple, so that everyone can understand the need of it. That would be my solution.
Okay, Ms. Seifert.
I don't believe that centralized meetings are the solution. I don't believe that expecting people always to come to us is the solution, nor do I feel that everybody has internet, and that's been a struggle for some of our students who have received Chromebooks, is the availability of internet at home. I do, in my role as Democratic chair and in my engagement with campaigns over the last several years, I've knocked a lot of neighborhoods, and I've discovered a lot of these needs. And those conversations at the door, at the grocery store, that's where you can really make a difference. Find out what it is that people need and refer them to needed services. Richmond has implemented a poverty initiative through their Office of Community Wealth Building. They're a couple years ahead of us. Some of the things they've done have worked, some have not. But they do release annual reports about those programs, and I think we have a lot to learn from it. Not the least of which was that they implemented plans to go out to the community to find out what the needs were and applied for grants in order to hire people to meet those needs. But we also need help from the people on the subcommittees, and we need to make sure that they have the support they need to go out there and have those conversations.
Okay, Mr. Billingsley.
I too believe you really need to take this to the people rather than hoping and praying that they're going to check social media and or the website, because not everybody does have that capability. So where would you find some place that people go? You can go to local churches. You can go to local grocery stores. What we could do is try to find some way to communicate through those venues. We could have someone from the city who is aware of more of the services, or just start talking with some of these places like CASA and Safe Families and those institutions, those organizations, and have them start sharing the wealth, because they're involved in things like the Retail Merchants Association, which they meet on a regular basis. So you have to find out where the people are and then actually take the message to them.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to combine the next two questions, and then I'll go back to drawing names here again, I think. First question, how are you going to protect communities if you don't invest in the police department? And the second question is, recently the heads of both the police and firefighting departments have reported a shortage of workers. Will you support raising salaries to entice more workers? First one, how are you going to protect communities if you don't invest in the police department? Second one is, recently the heads of both the police and firefighting departments have reported a shortage of workers. Will you support raising salaries to entice more workers? Mr. Nelson.
Thank you very much. No doubt, as a former police officer, I appreciate and recognize vividly the stresses that a police officer faces. And as a special justice, I work with the fire department and the EMS all the time, every day. Every time someone was brought in, the ambulance and the police were involved. I understand their plight, and it's a daily and nightly job that is not appealing. The city of Lynchburg has not neglected the fire department or the police department or the first responders EMS. We have given focus on their services and appreciate them, and we have given them raises, sometimes to the point that other city employees wonder why they get special treatment and the average workforce doesn't get the same raise. We are working, the problem is the national image of both serving the citizens in that role is not appealing for all the issues that are happening across the country, and persons go to other places. We are trying to be creative in shift changes and increasing the amount of training so that the individual persons placed in those positions don't have as much stress as they have in the past.
Thank you. Ms. Seifert.
I had two police officers show up at our house several years ago. It was the wrong house, but they were very friendly. We ended up on my front porch for about 30 minutes. They gave my then 2-year-old a sticker badge, and we exchanged emails. And the ability to contact the officers who routinely patrolled my neighborhood was incredible, absolutely incredible. Unfortunately, those officers left after a few years, and due to changes in terms of how we staff our police department, the shifts that they have, we've lost communication between the community and the police, and that, I believe, is undermining trust. You know, I've spent several years in financial services, including providing property insurance, and I can tell you that your property insurance rates are higher to insure your house, to get a renter's policy or a homeowner's policy, when your response times go down. And unfortunately, that could be an outcome if we don't properly fund both police and fire and make sure that they have the resources they need. Once again, if it comes down to taking that risk with my family or paying these workers, I much prefer to invest in them.
Okay. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you for asking me that. I try to reflect back in my mind on the 12 years that I served on council, and 6 of those years as the vice mayor. Public safety has always been a high concern of mine. My voting record would show that every time that they have came with a concern that I voted to meet those concerns. At the same time, we have to understand that there are a lot of people that go into law enforcement and public safety work in our city. We're in a unique situation where we're in direct competition with BWXT, where they can leave our force and go there and make almost twice as much money to guard a fence. And so a lot of times it's about to pay, but it's not about to pay. So when they have an occupation like that, we have to really understand, are they here to serve and protect? And if they are, and if we have a real shortage, check my voting record out. I have always supported it. It's sometimes at the detriment of other departments who feel like they're being treated as second-class citizens or stepchildren in the city because they don't get the same raises as public safety. But public safety is a major concern, and we have to keep our community in a response time with the fire department, with those heart attack calls, running people back and forward to the hospital. That's why people move to the city, because they want to feel safe and they want to make sure that their community is protected. And I will continue to do that in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Wright.
When I was in government, I worked closely with federal law enforcement officers who similarly felt, and I think this is true, were underpaid and overworked. And for a year, I sat right here and closely to Ms. Waller, right next to a law enforcement officer, and I saw personally just how much that environment can affect morale, and then of course turnover was high, and high turnover has a high cost. So I think there are not only strong civic reasons to ensure that we're paying our police officers and our firemen decent wages, but there's also, I think, a financial cost to not doing that as well. So yes, I would be supportive of, to answer the question directly, yes, I would be very much supportive.
Okay, Mr. Polly.
Yes, I would definitely want to see more support for both the fire department and the police department. I believe one of the groups that would be sacrificed for the police would be the community action group. I believe they had assembled a team to interact more with the citizens. The Lynchburg City Schools, the Lynchburg Police Department, and the Parks and Rec organized the Hill City Street League last summer, where we were trying to engage more, help the police officers meet the students on the basketball court and not just in a uniform, so we could begin to begin to develop that real relationship with the police officers. So to know that that's one of the initiatives that we would see being put to the wayside is not good news, because we're looking for building strong relationships with our community, strong relationships with our police and our students. So understanding the impact that would have on moving forward, I would like to see more emphasis and more priority put there to make sure we can keep the things outside of them just being on the beat, but their interaction in the community is much needed in a time like this.
Okay, Mr. Billingsley.
I had an interesting conversation with the police chief not too long ago, just a couple of weeks ago, and was asking him about some of the struggles that he is having with his police department. And he said basically he has got, I think, 175 police officers that he's allowed to have. Currently, he's down to about 140 because of turnover, and they're trying their best to hire them real quick, as fast as possible. And I actually I will be setting on an interview on Saturday for new officers. But anyway, his main goal right now is not so much higher wages. He would like to have some more officers. He said if he could have about 10 more officers, he wouldn't have to force so much overtime on so many officers, and that's what's burning most of these young men and women out, is they're working so much. They have overtime, but they just don't want it. They work too much.
Okay, Ms. Tweedy.
I, of course, support public safety, and while we talk about the salaries, and the City Council previous to my getting on and since I've been here, I've tried to keep competitive salaries. But one thing I have to put before the community is that we all want to work in a professional environment. We all want to work in facilities that are suitable. And I have to say, taking a tour of the police department, it was horrendous. And the fact that we expect our public safety officers to risk their lives to help us in times of challenge and tragedy, and then go back to small office quarters, or office quarters that most of us in the professional world would not deem acceptable. We would not. So I think it's a part of morale. It's a part of the careers, and are we encouraging folks to go into public safety and law enforcement? And also, how are we supporting them beyond salaries, but thinking about their mental health, thinking about the facilities that they operate in, and are we willing to do what it takes to help support that as well as salaries? Thank you.
Okay. Next question is addressed to Ms. Seifert and Mr. Polly. How would you confront Lynchburg's lack of affordable child care, considering its role in poverty and parents' ability to work? Ms. Seifert, you want to go first?
I was checking to see which one of us was going first.
Ladies first.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. I believe me, I know the struggle is real on this one. And when I had my first child, finding that affordable childcare was significant. It was a significant cost. We were so blessed through communicating with, talking, family members talking to colleagues. who also had little ones, to find a woman who ran a small in-home licensed daycare that provided tax receipts and everything else at a rate that we could afford. Frankly, some of the facilities we weren't able to afford and still make ends meet. Additionally, we have a lot of people who are in need of second shift and third shift childcare. We have got to do a better job of finding out what resources are out there and available for those individuals, and to make sure that families who need it are connected to those resources. It is hard to find good care, and I am just so grateful that we had it for our little ones.
Childcare, as a father of three, my youngest two are 6 and 7, so we had two in childcare at one time at about $140 a week. So it can be an extreme burden when it comes to a family trying to make ends meet. One thing that I noticed was that when it comes to being competitive, that sometimes I feel we weren't developing more childcare, more people who can go into the childcare field. There are a lot of people in the community who want to be licensed and offer that service for their community, but they don't know the next step to take to be able to offer that. So if we can provide more support for people who want to develop in that area, hopefully we can develop more competitive rates, because some of the standard of $140, $130 a week per child is just unbearable. So raising, hopefully, developing more child care centers that are that could compete with some of these rates could hopefully lessen the burden on parents, because that is a very tough situation to be in.
All right, thank you. Next question is for Mr. Wright. Mr. Wright, you are obviously a young man, but it seems like you have some unique political experience. Can you explain how your experience is relevant to serving on City Council?
Certainly. So I think that I want to bring a set of both political and financial skills to council, and so I'll address them in turn. Excuse me. So in terms of political skills, right, it's how does a bureaucracy work? How does an institution function? And I think I've proven myself, at least I did in my last job, to be a pretty quick study of how an institution works, because you have to. You simply can't not. So I think that I would bring sort of a certain level of political understanding to the process. And then second, I got in government really strong set of financial skills. How do government budgets work? Where might the fat be hidden, so to speak? And then also, how do you leverage your ability as a trustee of the taxpayer dollars to make smart strategic decisions about where you can invest those resources wisely to further the mission? So it's that level of experience, several years of experience, that I want to bring here to City Council.
Okay, the next question is for everyone, I think. The interim superintendent, Dr. Massey, said he can't justify 400 less kids and 200 more employees. Will you look at the budget or just rhetoric for the children? Shall we draw? You want that question again? The interim superintendent, Dr. Massey, said he can't justify 400 less kids and 200 more employees. Will you look at the budget or just rhetoric for the children? I guess if you're going to have 400 less kids, how can you justify 200 more employees? Is that how you read that? And will you, when you're on council, will you look at the budget, or you will just say it's for the children, is how I interpret that. So I think it's school, children, budget. And Mr. Billingsley.
Well, Dr. Massey, I think, had a very good point, and from what I understand, Councilman Perro had a real good point as well. We need to start looking real closely at how we're organized, how we're doing business in the school system. And I think it's a real good time for us to start having a hard look at redistricting, because I think we could save a lot of money if we could actually have a good conversation about that and start looking at redistricting and bringing as many local schools back in line as possible. We could save money on buses, we could save money on teachers, we could save money on a lot of things. So I think we need to look real hard at how our schools are structured right now.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. It certainly was an interesting observation to hear that from Dr. Massey. I have been aware of those numbers, and the first thing I would say is the City Council has no right, and in fact is constitutionally prohibited to tell the school division how it spends its money. All we can do is write a check, and we defer to them. However, last evening, or yesterday afternoon, we had a very candid, direct conversation with the new superintendent, Dr. Edwards, and we asked some of those questions as to how so many new employees were engaged over the last 4 years, given the drop in the number of students. And the answer was there were some creative methods and processes in addition to the mandated employees, and of course we have no control over those, but there were some new strategies to hire some people to assist in the instruction in the classroom. They were not teachers, but they were still assisting teachers. I think we suggested gently to the school division that they need to relook at that because those persons were very expensive. Of course, I do agree with some of the operational savings and some of the redistricting, but redistricting the attendance zone is a very long-term solution, not anything we're going to see in the next couple of years. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Polly.
As chair of the Finance Committee, I had a lot of experience hands-on with the budget. The budget of $100 million last year, we spent that all the way down to about $350,000. So we've been cutting it very close. That's too close for comfort, if you ask me. 86% of our budget goes to salary and benefits. So now we're looking at what's actually available. I know that the city is asking us for a $1.1 million decrease. Now we're looking at $2.1 million worth of mandates from the state of Virginia. They have mandates coming for individualized education plans and also mandates coming for special needs. So these are things that we have to pay regardless of if Lynchburg City Council decides to give us level funding. You add that with the fact that we have to take on $750,000 to repair our buses. Now you're adding more money to a bigger deficit. Where's the money supposed to come from? If 85% of our budget is going towards teachers and salary, I'm just trying to figure out where are we supposed to make the cuts because I don't see where it's supposed to come from.
Okay, Ms. Tweedy.
It's an interesting, involved, and complicated question because so many of our children have many needs. We are a stellar school division. We have children who can come K through 12 and then go into Ivy League schools as a sophomore because we have the tools in place. It is how are we looking at the needs of the students. Sometimes you can't always do the same things you've always done, and so you have to look at each department. You have to look at are you getting the outcomes that you need. We have to look at capital projects and is it more costly to renovate a school versus building a new school, and how do you build that school to meet our today's era of education and technology. Schools have to be seen as an economic driver for our society. Businesses come and relocate to places who have a great quality of life, a great education system, and a workforce that they can employ people. So we have to create the sustainable solutions that utilize our budget and our dollars the best way, and that means reviewing every stone and leaving no stone unturned for outcomes, successful outcomes.
Ms. Seifert.
We lost the science teacher position a few years ago, which means we now have 5 science teachers for all 3 grades at the middle school level. My classes range from 23 to 33 students. At one point this year, I was teaching 165 students among my 6 classes. The new mandates coming down say that as secondary teacher, I'm not supposed to teach more than 150 students without having a supplemental contract. That mandate coming down next year means that we have to make those changes. But it's not just about the students, and I was glad to see Dr. Massey come out and talk to us about the state that our schools are in. I am so grateful for the new Sandusky Middle School. I am so grateful for the new Heritage High School. Those were long-standing needs, but we have needed new roofs on many of our school buildings for quite some time, and we have been reticent to come out and say that. We still have elementary schools without gymnasiums. These are community use buildings, and if you go into some of our buildings and see the conditions, it's nothing that this community should be proud of.
Mr. Johnson.
After serving on council for 12 years and looking at 12 different budgets over that period of time, I have never been a part of a council or budget session where we just rubber stamped it for the sake of the children. Everything that has been processed, every dollar that's been sent has been a dollar that's been needed. How they manage the money once it gets over to the school side, we have no longer control over as a city council. The city of Lynchburg, our community has top-rated schools, and the community, along with the educational foundation, see the need that public education is the only opportunity some kids have to make a difference in their life. So there's not a dime that we're sent that way that I think has been wasteful. What I will say is that Lynchburg we always give more than what's required of us so that we can ensure that our schools are the best. And so with that in mind, I would tell you yes, there are some positions, but when you say you want to close the achievement gap, when you say you want all students to be taught equally, and when you want to make sure that you keep kids out of the prisoner pipeline system, I think people need to look at it a little more carefully.
Okay, Mr. Wright.
So I'm personally and intensely grateful to the education that I received in Lynchburg City Schools. It has made everything in my life since possible. And I believe that every child in Lynchburg City Schools should have that same opportunity and should receive that same quality education. That doesn't mean, however, that we just, as with any governmental entity, that we just give them a blank check. Right? It's City Council's job to scrutinize that budget, to ask hard questions, to ask questions about infrastructure and buses versus teacher pay. And I think that there are a lot of priorities that we do need to fund that currently aren't sort of on the agenda for the city schools. But all that said, I want to return to my main point, which is that I think we should be investing in ourselves and primarily investing in our city schools. So if that means more resources, let's have the conversation. If that means cutting administration positions, let's have that conversation. But most importantly, City Council should be engaged on this question and should be really scrutinizing the budget hard.
Okay. The next two questions concern downtown. I'm trying to figure how I can combine them, and they are addressed to everyone, both of them. We might just have a show of hands for these. How many candidates have walked the streets between 12th and 5th Court and Park? How many of the candidates have walked the streets between 12th and 5th Court and Park? So everybody. Have you visited the Boys and Girls Club Daily Bread? Everybody that? Okay. This is the first question then, about downtown. How can we know our neighborhood and assist them better? Okay, and the second one is kind of the other end of it. As we revitalize downtown, property values will rise, making it hard for average people to afford this housing. What strategies would you recommend to keep affordable housing available for the average family to live in the downtown area? Yeah, first one, how can we know our neighborhoods and assist them better? This was connected with visiting the different areas in the downtown area. And then, as we revitalize downtown, property values will rise, making it hard for average people to afford this housing. What strategy would you recommend to keep affordable housing available for the average family to live in the downtown area? Want a minute on that one? Mr. Polly gets it first. I'm sorry. You're still working away there.
No, it's okay. I know as far as getting out and knowing our community better, one thing that this campaign has done for me is being able to get out and get into all the nooks and crannies of Lynchburg. I've literally been out walking and meeting people, places that I'm not usually going, circles that I'm not usually in, and you'll be surprised the things that are on people's minds. People are open, willing to talk, they communicate very well, and they're not just worried about poverty, education, and economic development. I can tell you that. They have a lot of other concerns. So once you get out and start building relationships with people and they build that trust and rapport and they see that you're there to really hear what their concerns are, you'll get an ear very quick. If when they invite you into the house and sit you down at the living room table, they'll tell you exactly what's on their mind. And one thing I can say about Fifth Street and the development as far as making sure that we keep the neighborhood, people in that neighborhood able to stay there, is just literacy, education, helping people understand the process, understanding their taxes, and understand what's happening around them, opening that communication so they don't feel like they're being swept out from their own neighborhood, and they understand the process and how to possibly take advantage of some of the things that are going on in the process around them.
All right, Mr. Billingsley.
It's really difficult for me. I'm president of the Windsor Hills Neighborhood Association, and we first started probably 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. And initially we had a lot of involvement. People were interested and concerned because we had a new development coming in behind us. And that was great to see a lot of people come out. And I think we need more of that. But as time went on and the development happened and grew and went on, then the interest waned. And that's hard to keep people interested in a neighborhood association. To me, that's really key, to try to keep everybody connected and know what's going on in your neighborhood. So I have an email that I send out on occasion, and we have a Facebook page as well. But the affordability aspect would be the only thing I could think of right off the top of my head would be some sort of tax break for homeowners. That would help those, at least initially, and give them a short relief, at least for a short period of time.
Okay, Mr. Johnson.
This sounds like a good thing to have. Your tax rates go up, your property value goes up. But this is a problem that they have had all across America from the times that they have had communities like Georgetown. Historically, people were in those communities, and once they improved those communities, those people couldn't afford to stay there. And so education is going to be the key, and then connecting them with programs like LINCAG and those programs that will help them refinance, those programs that will help them with home ownership. And those are the only things that we can push as a city. But we want to make sure that those people who are there are grandfathered in and they don't lose their property because the community gets better. I was on council, I hate to keep saying it like that, when we brought the first traffic circle into the Fifth Street ward. We wanted Fifth Street to come back. Fifth Street's coming back, but we want those people who were there all the time struggling to be there as it continues to improve. Thank you.
Ms. Tweedy.
I think it is to keep housing affordable options and to help understand what is our housing stock and to encourage home ownership throughout our community. I start with workforce development. People need increased incomes to sustain their housing, the maintenance, the renovations. As cities, we can adopt policies that allow for tax incentives, which we have done this year, but we have to support those agencies that provide home ownership, financial literacy. Also, we have a new housing navigator through the Housing Authority, which is currently part-time, and that role is to help understand the housing stock and what's available to all residents throughout downtown. We have to encourage folks to know how to increase their incomes. I repeat that because many neighborhoods with high median incomes have pride of home ownership. They have folks who understand the routine maintenance and are able to afford these things. And so we have to encourage median income increase to help support neighborhood development.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. When the pronoun "we" is used, I assume it's not council getting to know, but it's our citizens getting to know, and I'm going to approach it from that direction. First of all, I think the city does take great initiative in scheduling events at community centers through neighborhood walks of the inspections department to go through and get the neighbors to join them to see what the conditions are that need to be addressed and to take the initiative to improve and be proud of their neighborhood. Likewise, we have neighborhood watch events, and the police department is engaging in greater engagement to know the citizens and encourage the citizens to know each other. With regard to the housing cost, as has been said, it's a good thing when property values go up. That's been the problem downtown for so long in the central city. At this point, the city does have a proactive program, whether it's through the Community Development Advisory Committee, CDAC, with home funds and rehabilitation funds to either assist persons in repairing houses that may otherwise have to be vacated or to purchase houses with supplemental loans that can be forgiven over a period of 5 years if they continue to live there. And all of these things are part and parcel of the Poverty to Progress program. Each of the questions tonight touches on one of those committees.
Mr. Wright.
So on the first question about how to really know the communities, I think it's about getting out there and meeting people where they are. There's no substitute for the honest face-to-face interaction and conversation. In fact, we did that just the other day. We went over to the Friends of Tinbridge Hill. They held a forum, which was incredibly instructive. And so I think that the city, as it does now, should continue partnering with groups like the Friends of Tinbridge Hill. It's about ensuring that the LPD has that CAT team to go out there and talk to folks. It's and maybe it's about posting up at the Community Action Network on the Fifth Street Circle or over at the Johnson Health Center and asking people. The city does conduct surveys of its citizens, so that's another way to do that. And then on the second question, which I think gets at the question of gentrification, and I've researched this. I just don't know of any community that's doing it well. So that's our big challenge, is to outsmart everybody else. However, we can focus on affordable housing. We can focus on building inclusive communities. So maybe that's strengthening our housing department and others. But there's a lot of work we have to do to ensure that folks can stay in their communities.
Okay, Ms. Seifert.
You have to go out there to the doors. I have a reputation among the students that you don't want to leave your homework because that teacher will absolutely show up at your house with it. And going into the neighborhoods is my greatest joy, is going out there and meeting people. It's not just in downtown either. We have some incredible neighborhoods all over this city. I have met some of the most wonderful people off Ford Avenue, off Timberlake Road, just some really unique areas where families have lived there for a long period of time and have really gotten to know each other. Darrington is a great example of that as well. So I bought my house. It was vacant. It was condemned. It had a green sticker, and I paid $24,000 for it. It has been a work in progress for many years. We are obviously invested, and my husband and I have been able to, we do what we can when we can. I can't say enough for my neighbors at Victoria Ridge, which is a Rush Homes project. We are in dire need of more affordable and accessible housing. I was concerned about how a housing development would affect the traffic flow, but it has just been wonderful. So making sure our incentive programs are focused on the residents as much as possible rather than landlords.
Okay. Next question is to everyone also. The Lynchburg Planning Commission recommends that 47 acres of nonprofit Humankind's 166-acre property be rezoned from residential to institutional use. What is your position on this controversial zoning request from Humankind? Mr. Billingsley, I'm really not picking on you. You just rise to the top there.
Maybe it's alphabetical. I don't know. That's an interesting situation we have there. I would be very, very hesitant to grant that carte blanche to Humankind. However, I would really like to look closer into what they plan on doing. If it would be okayed, then I would really like to have some strong restrictions and monitor that very closely because I'm concerned about what they might put against the residents out there. So it would be something that I would be very cautious about and would not just outright grant, but it would be worth looking into a little further. And so long as there were restrictions and there was more buy-in from the local residents, then we might be able to go forward with that.
Okay. Ms. Tweedy.
This is a very familiar subject, as we were here very late last night. I think you have to look at the fact of listening to people, understanding the rights of organizations, but also finding what we found last night were some very legal, complicated issues with the zoning, and the fact of they were collaboration and or understanding each other as neighbors was important. And so they were working things out up to about 98% of what the disagreements were. And so the ability for them to go back and look at the issue again, you don't want to give the carte blanche. And if there is not a set strategy or plan for long-term planning, it has to all be addressed. But that issue, there were more legal complications that we were able to delay that vote. So,
Mr. Johnson.
You asked me, wouldn't you? I would tell you, we always talk about opportunities for kids to have places to play in the city. We're always talking about the need for more recreational activities. But when you do that, you have to think about the neighborhood. I remember being on council and the circus wanted to go out there, and that was a stir. And so I would be remiss, I would hope that this current sitting council would be able to get this done before the new council arrives. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right then.
Oh, Mr. Wright.
Dodge it too, or?
Yeah, you get the question.
I think all of us here are supportive of humankind's mission. It's a noble mission, it's a worthy mission, and so I think we all want to be supportive of it, while also being cognizant of the safety concerns of residents of Westminster. And I do understand from what I read in the paper today that there are some legalistic questions to work out. So I don't want to necessarily punt on the question but I do think it's important that we do get that answer before we sort of announce a public position. I used to run cross country out there when it was the Pres home. So it's a beautiful spot of land. I'm excited about the improvements that they want to make, and I guess the question is, are they somehow hamstrung that might prevent them from getting that institutional permit, or perhaps they can just do everything they need to do with a conditional use permit. But I want to see the results of that conversation.
Okay. Mr. Polly.
Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
The Lynchburg Planning Commission recommends that 47 acres of nonprofit Humankind's 166-acre property be rezoned from residential to institutional use. What is your position on this controversial zoning request from Humankind?
Well, anytime you have controversy, it's always fair that you listen to both sides. I know that there are pros and cons on the decision, but when it comes to actually getting the facts, I think that's very important. And with any type of legal concern, to be able to understand the ramifications, the ripple effect, things that you might not see. So I think that it would be our best interest to make sure that we understand what the possible liabilities are, what situations we're putting ourselves in before we make a decision. Just my experience on the school board, anytime that there's possibility for legal ramifications, it's best to make sure that you understand the facts to the fullest of the extent, and that's not a position that I have right now. So I would be very keen on investigating the facts and understanding legal ramifications before I made a decision to support one way or the other.
Okay, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. I think last night it was clear that 98% of those who were in attendance, and it was standing room only, did not oppose the facilities that were proposed to be built everybody in Lynchburg would benefit from. The issue was the institutional zoning designation of the land, which is a new creation, and what that does, very simply, is to say that within the footprint of a campus, the campus owner can build almost anything they want as long as it does not significantly impact neighbors outside of that campus. In this instance, the IN zoning relied on an easement through Westminster Canterbury property from VES Road in. There's a debate, legal debate, and I don't want to talk about it too much because currently the attorneys are trying to resolve this. But if that easement were vacated because of being overburdened by what goes on the campus, then the only access would be through a private residential street, Linden Avenue, unless another easement was built. So the concern from council was, do we want to grant institutional zoning, which would give carte blanche authority to build anything within the campus, and then end up having humankind lose the access, which would mean it would significantly affect a little neighborhood that's not suitable for that type of traffic. And we postponed it to let the lawyers talk.
Okay, Ms. Seifert.
Because Lynchburg is landlocked, I was concerned when institutional zoning was introduced until I heard my alma mater, Lynchburg College, come out and say, look, we moved the storage shed on the baseball field and we had to take out a CUP. Every single time we do anything, we have to take out a CUP. That conditional use permit not only costs us money, it costs time of the city staff. It's time that we could be using differently. And so, I feel as though if we can make institutional zoning work for Liberty University and for Lynchburg College, I hope that the legal matter can be resolved and that we can find a good solution for humankind with some level of institutional zoning so that they can do what needs to be done on their campus with fewer costs, fewer trips downtown, less involvement with their city workers, and that solution between humankind and Westminster can be resolved.
Okay, I'm watching my watch here. We have several questions on poverty and several questions on the environment. I'm going to try to combine these. On poverty, one is who can factually state what the city is currently spending on poverty. Another is poverty is a focus of our city, and efforts and the Poverty to Progress initiative has started in a rocky fashion. What would you do to fix the city's poverty initiative and to add systemic racism as one of the initiative subgroups? And another one is the links between trauma and generational poverty, and what, if any, focus should there be on trauma in the community discussions on poverty? I think if you could address broadly poverty, what the city is spending on it, and what you propose to do about it. Mr. Nelson again.
Thank you. I don't know, even if I had all of the spreadsheets and tables, that I could tell you what is being spent on poverty. It is a huge figure. It involves what happens in our J&D courts, in the social services, of which is partly state funded and partly city funded. It's involved in the education system, some of which comes from federal dollars, state dollars, and some city dollars. It involves what we do in our community outreach programs and our community centers and our recreation programs. Poverty affects everything and everyone in this city in one way or the other. So I think it's not appropriate to be distracted by the specific number, but to say it's huge. With regard to trauma, trauma is profound. Trauma comes in the frame of hunger, of physical abuse, psychological abuse, living conditions, and anyone who is experiencing trauma in any facet or phase is going to see ramifications in their ability to learn, to work, to have positive relationships with their family and their friends, and it's going to ripple out and have a negative effect on all of us.
Okay, Mr. Wright.
So I think, as we've all discussed, poverty is certainly the biggest issue, I think, facing this community, and I believe it's a moral imperative that we address it. And part of it, I think, is obviously it's pushing on a lot of fronts. It's pushing on education. It's pushing on food deserts. I know that the Food Group and Poverty to Progress Initiative have been making some headway there. It's about addressing transportation, that it's actually meeting the needs of the folks who use the transportation system, specifically GLTC. So there's a lot of different ways that we can, as a community, be rallying around the issue of poverty. And I'll address the sort of issue about poverty to progress and how it's rolled out. I think it's been, in terms of a first step, it's been good for raising awareness. But one of the central criticisms that I've heard is that there isn't enough institutional support provided by the city and a long-term commitment made. And so I do want to see, and I understand that it's multifaceted, but I do want to see more institutional support for the Poverty to Progress Initiative, specifically in the form of administrative support.
Ms. Tweedy.
I have props for this answer, if you don't mind. GLTC survey and consultant work toward finding improved intercity routes and shorter transfer times for better service delivery to customers. Check. City appropriated funding toward Poverty to Progress initiative. Check. 9 volunteer subcommittees working on actionable goals to meet finding solutions to challenges and barriers faced by our residents in poverty. Check. Education subcommittee and partners implementing community registration days for 4-year-olds into our citywide pre-kindergarten programs, plus seeking solutions to expanding the number of seats available to 4-year-olds for pre-K programs. Check. 50% of the assistant city manager's job duties relate to coordinating the From Poverty to Progress initiative. Community wealth building grant of $117,000 or so received, which helps support the Tech Hire program, helping individuals connect work and training opportunities. Check. Housing navigator hired through actionable goals that were set through the housing subcommittee. Check. Access to excellent health care options for all citizens located through the work of Centra Health, improving collaboration amongst providers and better understanding of services provided and identification of duplicated efforts. Check. A rocky start with outcomes that are going to continue.
Mr. Billingsley.
I think Mr. Nelson addressed the cost issue quite adequately. I don't think there's any way we can actually put a cost figure. As far as poverty, the family is in trouble, in my opinion, and we have a fallout in the family. We have families that are broken, and we have single-parent moms trying to raise children. That makes it very difficult. Sometimes the grandfather is trying to raise children. So we have families in crisis. Safe Families for Children, which is administered by Patrick Henry Services, which I'm a part of, addresses this issue by helping those families in crisis overcome that crisis. If we could strengthen the family, that would reduce the crisis, the trauma that we have, and that would start bringing people back out of poverty slowly but surely. Also, the idea I have about trying to bring more industry in that has a higher paying wages would help to bring the poverty level down as well.
Okay, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. I don't know exactly the figure for the poverty initiative, but I am proud to say that I was on council when the first official $50,000 was invested by the city into the poverty initiative. This really set the pace for where they are now. We've made a firm commitment with dollars, not just talking about it, but we were able to get out of a 7-member council $50,000 to start this poverty to poverty initiative. And if I'm re-elected to council, I make sure that we put our money where our mouth is by putting dollars behind it to make sure that it's successful.
Okay. Ms. Seifert.
I think the rollout, we have to acknowledge that there were some stumbles. 50 families that we were going to select somehow, the project proposal window, once we finally got one, was too narrow, did not give the subcommittees time to get their proposals together, and those have been unfortunate. Again, I think we need to take a look at what other communities are doing and learn both from their successes and from their failures, and certainly we're going to make many mistakes along the way, but you don't get a 24% poverty rate with less than 5% unemployment. and find that jobs are the only solution. 24% poverty, less than 5% unemployment, means many of the individuals we're talking about are elderly, many of them have disabilities, many of them are children, and a lot of them are working, and they are not being paid enough. One of the things that Richmond is rolling out just now, and I'd like to see how they do over the next 6 to 8 months, is a living wage certification program to acknowledge those businesses and entities that are paying people what they enough to survive.
Okay, Mr. Polly.
I believe the Progress Out of Poverty initiative is designed to help get people out of poverty, but I believe one thing that they didn't focus on was helping to keep people out of poverty. And I think the only way you do that is by addressing the mindset. Poverty is a mindset, and until you actually begin to give people the financial literacy to help change their mindset, I don't think that any of the other things that we're focusing on will be as effective. As Ms. Seifert said, the 24% poverty rate with the 4% unemployment rate, we have to look at people that are supposed to be gainfully employed, but it seems like they're painfully employed. I've worked at the local factories here in Lynchburg. I know that I had a job in the quality department, but the people on the assembly line were making minimum wage. And on top of that, they had to go through a temp agency that was taking a percentage of their pay, and they were not receiving benefits. So that's a very big percentage of the employees that we have here in Lynchburg. So maybe we need to have a conversation with some of the temp agencies to see exactly what service they're providing, that they could take that much of the percentage from the hard-working citizen here in Lynchburg. These are people that are going to work, working hard 40, 50 hours every week, and still aren't able to pay their bills. So we don't have a jobs problem in Lynchburg as much as a quality of jobs problem here in Lynchburg. So we really need to focus on making sure everyone has access to a salary that can bring them up to the living wage.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and we still have quite a few questions here. So if the candidates don't mind hanging around a little bit when we get through, so some of you that did not get your questions here could ask them directly, that would be appreciated. Let me just make one announcement here before we have our closing statements from the candidates. The Candidates Forum will be rebroadcast on LTV on Monday and Wednesday, April the 16th, 18th, 23rd, 25th at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and 8 p.m. It's also available on the city's website under special programs, www.lynchburgvirginia.gov/LTV. As I said before, you can find information about the candidates and what their ideas on several topics on the line vote411.org. And there will be free bus rides on May 1st, Election Day. So we encourage you to vote. Let's wrap up now. Each candidate has 2 minutes for a closing statement, and I think we started this way before. I think we'll just work back this way. Mr. Wright, you're on.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks very much to all of you for coming. I think it's a real testament to this community and its civic engagement that so many folks are here tonight and interested in what we have to say. So it's really delightful. So I'm running for 3 reasons. But first, I'll just say I love our community. I love Lynchburg. When I was away, I always made sure to have a little Visit Lynchburg tourism brochure near at hand in case any of my friends were going on vacation and need a recommendation about where to go, because we have wonderful historic sites, we have an incredible topography. We're the gateway to the Blue Ridge. This is a special place. It's a wonderful community. And I'm running for 3 reasons. I'm running because I think that I bring a set of values and priorities to this community that I think a lot of us share. Growing our economy, strengthening our schools, building a high quality of life for everyone, which means centrally addressing poverty. I think I bring a set of experiences and skills that are of value and can be of value to this community. It's what I want to contribute in terms of government experience, specifically government budgets, which, as we know, is one of the biggest roles that City Council plays. And then lastly, I think I bring a different perspective, a different sensibility to council, which is that of a young person. So right now, young people, it's no surprise, make up a significant chunk of Lynchburg's population. In fact, it's over 50% under the age of 35. And yet we currently don't have representation on city council. And I think this is important because in downtown revitalization is a prime example. City Council makes decisions that affect this community not just in the near term or the medium term, but in the long term, decades from now. I hope to be living here decades from now, and I hope many of my peers are as well. And I think it's important that we have not 50% of the seats on City Council, but at least one seat on City Council, so that this demographic has representation in this body as they make big decisions for our community.
Let's please hold your applause till everyone gets through, please. Okay, Ms. Tweedy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time this evening. I like to consider myself a connect-the-dot politician. And what I mean by that is, for those who don't know, my professional role is workforce development and community engagement. So I do know that there are 4 companies here that need 100 welders yesterday. I do know there's a new company coming that needs 250 welders out in the county. I do know that in order to increase median wages and in order to increase training and education and credentials, we have to motivate folks to work harder and work smarter. They have to go beyond where they think they can go. And so that means I can't go back to the community and say, I want you to go work at a place where we give you this great income, but you may not be able to afford your car and your insurance now, and guess what? The bus service doesn't even go out there, or it's not available during second shift hours. So I think we have the responsibility as politicians, as leaders, to fix problems. The poverty rate was 19% 20 years ago. It's only increased. That's because we've talked about things. We've talked about what's not available, how we can't do this, but we've not actually solved some of the solutions. I'm action-oriented, and I'm ready to solve those solutions. I think we have to understand poverty's been around since civilization began. And so we have to have all of these balls rolling at the same time. We can no longer say it's going to take us the next 2 years to fix this barrier. It's going to take us the next 4 years to get child care in place. Employers need second shift child care today. They needed it yesterday. So we have to create options for folks that have our community in a place for future opportunities. How many of you understand that technology is replacing a lot of the jobs we're talking about? We need vocational skills, but I know Courtyard Marriott here is testing out a robot. You can go to McDonald's and punch in your own order and pay for it and not even see a cashier or clerk. So what are we really expecting from folks? We need to create higher expectations for our organizations, our cities, our communities. I'm ready to do that. I've started to do that, and I want to continue to do that. So I ask for your vote on May 1st.
Thank you. Please. Mr. Polley.
Oh, man. Well, I'm very passionate about education, as you guys can tell. Some of my colleagues on the panel tonight were fortunate enough to go to Lynchburg City Schools to receive their education. That was not the case for me. I grew up in Southside Houston, Texas. Went to Sharpstown High School. There's a documentary on my high school on PBS right now called Dropout Nation. And it goes over the challenges that happen when you choose to, year by year, not give level funding and funding to education. So I come from a different perspective. I don't want Lynchburg to go that route. I know that we didn't, in my high school, we didn't get there overnight. It happened year by year, layer by layer. Over time, our schools began to deteriorate. And I don't want to see that here in Lynchburg. So I'm very compassionate to what might happen here in Lynchburg. I live in a food desert right now, so economic development is a priority for me. Helping people in that neighborhood have access to fresh produce, making sure that they can get to a pharmacy, the elderly and the young, that's something that I live, that I see every day, not only just for my neighborhood, but for other pockets of town. The poverty initiative here in Lynchburg, I know it's done a great job addressing identifying the problem. So it has done a great job raising awareness. But I feel like we're missing some steps. In order to really give the citizens of Lynchburg what they need, financial literacy is mandatory to help them address poverty as a mindset so they can believe that they can have control over their financial forecast, that they can improve their financial engine, and that they can be a successful citizen too. I've lived in poverty, so this isn't something I'm guessing. I don't need a study. I don't need any research or any data to identify with the people that are going through the 24.7% poverty rate. So I plan on bringing some real life experiences and helping people show them a better way so they can believe that Lynchburg is a great place to live, work, and play like the rest of us.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, and thank you for being here and for being so attentive. When I first came on council 8 years ago, this city and this council was very highly polarized. Discussions were not courteous and sometimes rude. I was somewhat ashamed of that. I have made it my personal ambition, being on council, to try to bring courtesy, civility, and collaboration to our discussions and our deliberations. As an old coach, I look at a team of all of the people in this city and see everyone as being capable of contributing to the success of this city. And everyone on council has the ability to contribute positively to a discussion. And I think today, this council, as it now sits, and I hope in the future, will share that collaboration and that courtesy and that civility that we have. For 5 decades, I have zealously advocated for the poor, for civil rights, and for the underprivileged. Out-of-control campaign spending that I've seen in the last national election and this past state election bothers me. So many millions of dollars are spent on promoting a candidate when they could be spent on community needs. Given the fact that City Council is now advocating poverty as an issue, and I too hold that up, as I said earlier, as one of my priorities, I felt that I could not, in good conscience, ask anyone to contribute anything to a campaign. So this year, I have made it my pledge that I will not ask for campaign contributions, I will not accept campaign contributions, and I will not spend anything on campaigning other than to use the signs left over from 2014. Instead, I ask my supporters and those who don't support me to contribute to the Poverty to Progress or a house of worship or a nonprofit or school foundation, so your money can go into some tangible benefit that will assist all of our citizens. We have 3 votes on May 1st. I ask for one of those 3 votes. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
I'm running for City Council on a One Lynchburg platform. I represented City Council for 12 years as a ward representative for Ward 2. I know the poverty initiative by heart. I represented an area in the city with all of the low-income apartments, all the Section 8s, but as well as all the historic districts. I'm running because our problems are not located in just one ward. I'm running because our problems are not Republican Party problems or Democratic problems, but they're our problems as citizens of Lynchburg. I'd like to go back to council and represent all citizens in Lynchburg on the One Lynchburg campaign. I bring 12 years of experience back to council. I will be able to come in and be up and running with the issues that are facing our nation at a critical moment right now, and that we need proven leadership to be able to go to the table and be able to affect change. I'd like to bring that back to council, affect change that affects all of us all over this city, and be a proud member of the council that moves us forward. I had the first traffic circle in the city, and look where traffic circles are now. We have downtown revitalization. Look where we are now. All over the city, people want their neighborhoods fixed up. They want their communities better. And I think I can represent all of the citizens with that in mind. Thank you tonight. I ask for one of your votes on May 1st. You have 3. I'm asking for one of them. If you give one this way, one that way, look at me and give me one. Thank you.
Ms. Seifert.
There's one.
It's a tough act to follow. I have, when you love something or you love someone, it is, I think, natural to try to avoid criticism. But there's also a time when you realize that it can be better, that the situation can improve, and it's important to come out and to say that. I've always believed in increased community engagement and voter engagement. Back in 2008, I was typing in voter registration forms at the registrar's office as a volunteer. I've done voter registration and restoration of rights, and I know this organization does a lot of work on that as well. Someone told me some time ago that this year would be a lot easier for them if we had gotten all the right people in the room a few months ago and decided who should run for council. And I fundamentally disagree with that premise because the decision is up to the people of Lynchburg on May 1st. And if I did not believe that my perspectives and experiences would be valuable, I would absolutely not be running in this race. I want to ask for one of your 3 votes on May 1st, but I also want to let you know that I need your help. And if you can knock doors, if you can make phone calls, if you can help my campaign in any way, shape, or form, I'll promise you will not regret it. Knocking doors, getting to know this community is one of the greatest things. Please vote for me on May 1st. Thank you.
Mr. Billingsley.
Well, I'm the last one between you and the door, so I'll try to get through this pretty quick. I moved here in 1986 with my wife to take a job at Babcock & Wilcox as an engineer. I worked there 21 and a half years. I sell insurance now. While I was still at B&W, I started my first of 3 terms on Lynchburg City School Board. I was there on the Governor's School Board is all 9 years. Served on several task force, the Heritage High Task Force, the Athletic Fields Task Force. I'm involved on CASA, on the board of directors. I'm involved with Safe Families. I went through the Citizens Academies. My wife and I do therapy dogs. We visit several areas of the community, Lynchburg General, Runkin Pratt, and Lincoln Elementary. So I'm very involved in this community. I love this community. It's been great to me, and I plan on serving it no matter what. So I really would like to have your vote. I have met several people over the years, especially the last 10 years, and they always ask me one question: are you related to Charles? No, I'm sorry, I'm not related to Charles, and I cannot sing. So when you go to vote on May 1st, just remember, he also spells his name with an E, and I do not. So that's another key component. So when you go to vote on May 1st, I want you to remember, no E, can't sing, vote for me. Thank you.
Many thanks to our outstanding group of candidates here. Thank you for coming. Thanks to all of you. Just get out and vote.